Watching Breakthrough News, and this is the Freedom Side. I'm your normal host, Eugene Perrier. Thank you for joining us on this special edition of the Freedom Side. We're going to be talking about everything related to Judas and the Black Messiah, just released today. New biopic pick centered on the life of Fred Hampton and the history of the Chicago Black Panther Party and the broader radical movement of that time. So we've got an amazing set of people, but before I go any further, I just want to welcome Sierra Taylor, who is joining us here as a host. Sierra.
An abnormal host. You said you were a normal host, so I guess I'm abnormal.
Well, you know, what can I say? It's not always bad to be different, Sierra. That's what is important to remember, that it's okay to stand out and to be yourself.
I is special, I is kind, and I is smart. No, I'm happy to be here. This is going to be so awesome. I'm excited.
No, this is going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. We've got Rosa Clemente. We've got young activists coming from the streets of Chicago. We're going to have our great friend, Sean Blackman. Yeah, Good Kids, Mad City. Fantastic folks. Jared Ball is going to be on here. Hopefully we're going to also be joined by Eddie Conway, former Black Panther, former political prisoner from the city of Baltimore, also a journalist himself. So, you know, there's so much that we're going to get into, so much that we're going to say. If you've seen the movie already, I think you know there's quite a bit to be said about it. But before we get into any of it, there's a couple things I want to do. The first thing, as those who watch this show always know I do, is to remind you to take this time, take a second, hit that share button, and make sure that everybody who is following you can be following us. We absolutely want people to be able to see what we have here tonight. It's obviously a crucially important issue. And I think that when we're talking about what is happening here, that one of the important things we want to start off with is that we often raise money for ourselves. We obviously want people, we're a crowdfunded group, but in the legacy of Fred Hampton, there's a very important project that is happening in Chicago right now in the Maywood area. It's been going on for a few years now. And that is Fred Hampton's childhood home, which at one point, and you can see there on the bottom of the screen the website you can go to. At one point, developers were trying to buy it, all this nonsense.
Not surprised.
Thankfully, due to the work of Fred Hampton Jr. and other folks in the Chicago area and probably around the country, no doubt, that element of it was secured. Now the mission of the Save Hampton House project is to turn the childhood home of Fred Hampton into a museum, not just about Fred, but about the Black Panthers, about their legacy, about their history. So you can see there the website, savehamptonhouse.org, that is there. Please go to savehamptonhouse.org. There's also a hashtag SaveHamptonHouse. Please support that. Do whatever you can. I think anyone who saw this movie can see, Sierra, how important it is that we remember the legacy of Fred Hampton, which to me, well, I don't know. You tell me what your maybe initial hot takes are about the movie, but that's kind of what I've been sitting with, is just like the power of his legacy.
I don't really have a hot take.
Okay,
but
give me your well-considered intellectual opinion.
I mean, Fred Hampton to me is just, I think about him all the time, both as an organizer and also as a political educator. His love for the people is something that just inspires me because, under this system of greed and exploitation, we're taught to hate ourselves, we're taught to hate each other, to love the enemy. And so Fred Hampton really coming to us and saying that, if you're fighting for justice, if you're fighting for liberation, then you're fighting for the love of your people, and you go all in. And I just...
Well, what everyone wants to know is, well, I appreciate that, but what everyone's going to want to know is, did you like the movie? Did you feel that it lived up to that legacy?
Hell yeah. I thought it was good. I was super worried. I thought it was going to be one of those Disney remakes. I'm not going to call out names of movies.
No, let's definitely call some out. Like the end of Catch a Fire about South Africa, which was a great movie. And then when he's about to kill the apartheid torturer, it cuts he's like, no, I could never do that. This is so terrible. Disney, what are you doing? He's torturing people. Just take him out. It was much better than that.
Yes, it was. But I love how you know almost every movie.
Shout out to Derek Luke. You did a great job in that movie. Wherever you are.
Wherever you are, dear.
Much better than Antoine Fisher. Anyway, Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yes.
I'm already taking us off the point.
No. It was just so wild. I feel like you probably had the same experience when I was watching the film, because I was so worried about Fred Hampton's legacy, because of the way that the media misremembers our heroes and lifts up, or highlights things that aren't necessarily serving the class or the movement. But there were so many points where I'm like, oh, he's like, I read this speech. Like, this is word for word. Or like, I've watched this, excerpt. I can't get away from it. I feel like, especially the history of the Rainbow Coalition, which I think is so important, and so many people skip over that.
Yeah.
I really feel like Fred Hampton was
Just for
executed.
those who maybe don't know.
Oh, yes.
Explain. I mean, I know we're hoping that you all watch the film and that you know everything about everything, but we're also here to inform you. So just for those who maybe don't know.
Slow me down.
No, it's totally fine. It's totally fine.
This is not Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition, by the way. I mean, I hope Jesse Jackson's not watching this.
He could be.
All right, well, bang, bang, shots fired. But no, this is the original Rainbow Coalition, where Fred Hampton was bringing together folks from the Young Lords we saw in the movie, the Puerto Rican groups. Oh gosh, the Young Patriots. People who had moved up from Appalachia. These are poor white folks living in the ghettos of Chicago, and then pulling together the gangs. Like I said, I feel like that activity of bringing together people who have been divided for generations, I think that's what actually got him killed. And I was pleasantly surprised to see the movie actually highlight that, when so many of the stories around Fred Hampton usually focus on this like very black nationalism, which he wasn't even about.
Yeah, and that's how they started the film, I thought, which is interesting, with that speech. I mean, they did a lot of work in that sort of intro scene. I especially love how they introduced, Deborah, who had become his wife, Mama Akua, for those of us who know her from, so many movement things over the years. Beautiful person. And I just thought, one, the just boldness of her to just come up and like check him and be like, yeah, I mean, you're not even really as good as you think you are, was cool. But I also thought to bring that element into, and I don't know, I mean, there's things like that some people will probably feel, and certainly I can think of some off the top of my head, that it was maybe unfair, but I think that it brought a realness to the politics of the Panthers and a delineation between the Panthers and other elements politically. And I don't know. It's one of those things where the way I often come at movies like this is, and I felt the same way about Vanguard of the Revolution, the PBS documentary, is if you didn't know anything about it really at all, when you leave the film, do you feel like this character, this person, this historic personage is someone you identify with, who you think is positive, who is doing good things, generally feeling good about the Black Panthers, Fred Hampton, everything that was happening? To me, that's good. It's important because it creates the basis in order to have a discussion and to move people and to talk to people. And I think we lose that too much. Like, yes, it's obviously Hollywood.
Right.
Clearly, anything that is Hollywood is going to be, not everything you want it to be.
Right.
And there's always, the politics, the behind the scenes or whatever. But I mean, I guess that's my broader point in a way. Like, if Fred Hampton's point is, you can only fight capitalism with socialism. Well, if you don't have a total transformation of the entire means of production, I often wonder, like, well, what do people really want out of these films? Like, I mean, obviously, if it was bad, I would do it. But, I mean, they said he was a socialist multiple times. They brought out I'm the proletarian, I'm not the pig. I'm going to die living for the revolution. I'm high off the people. I mean... The
political education, the militant work.
Yes.
I appreciated that so much because I feel like people just talk about, oh, they had breakfast programs. Oh, they had, health care and such.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, they have these incredible projects of, like, revolution, and not just, simply to feed people in the here and now, which I feel like people try to do as this way of charity, but actually, using this tool, being able to feed people, to be in relationship with people, not just giving people food and just, here you are on your way, but how can we actually build as a community? How can we actually build trust? How do we free you up so that you don't have to cook, dinner? You can come here and have a meeting with us. Your children can be taken care of while we, sort of conspire together. I I love seeing those different elements too. It wasn't all just walking around with guns in your hands.
Yeah.
Like there was actually real work being done with the community at all times.
Well, let me ask you this, and then I want to bring in our first guest. So, you know, the big controversy about the film, that everyone thought from the beginning, because obviously Lakeith Stanfield is very famous, so he's the main person that the studio is promoting.
He's fine.
Maybe he's watching this. Would you anything you want to say to him? I think Lakeith Stanfield is a great actor.
Yes,
I'll say that.
A very good actor.
And
very
I think,
smart, very,
yeah. I thought he actually played this role to the hilt. But I always I felt the same way like Bruno Ganz in Der Untergang, which is about Germany, but he plays Hitler. And people were like, oh, what a great job. And I was like, how does that even feel? Like, oh, I did a great job playing Hitler. Wow, that's terrible. So I often wonder how actors in these situations even feel about these roles. That's what I would love to ask Lakeith Stanfield. But now that I've gone so far off the mark to German films, how did you feel about, was it too centered on him? Do you think it was fair in terms of looking at sort of how that informant piece comes around? I mean, how did you feel about that element of it?
I mean, all I kept thinking about when watching the film and watching Lakeith go through this whole sort of process, I think that, you know, for me as an educator, I just kept thinking this is why we need political education in our communities. And I think that Fred Hampton, even though this is, you know, it's not, we don't know exactly what his interaction was with this like Fed guy or whatever, but you saw how when Lakeith would try to get him caught up in trying to say some violent things or do some violent things, and because of Fred Hampton's politic and his discipline, he knew not to go there. And I feel that way like this summer when we were out in the streets and I would be at, you know, these protests for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, there was some where you would have people, a completely nonviolent protest, and I'm not judging anything, but then you have people like, I remember there's one protest, this guy starts jumping on cars and just walking up and down, like walking down the street, like on cars. And I didn't know anyone at that protest. I kind of just went out by myself. But I gathered a few people, and I was like, yo, this guy's a Fed. Like, who else? Like, everyone's chilling, doing this march, and this dude's wilding out. And so I grabbed people to sort of build a perimeter around him and be like, no, you are not among us. And so I'm just thinking about if you have that political clarity and you're able to see and know how our enemy fights, then it can neutralize. And I just kept thinking like, darn, like, what if we got this guy younger? But then after I saw the film and they had that little interview with him, and I was like, no, F this guy. No.
Yeah, he took himself out. You know, before we go to our first guest, actually, I do want to go to the booth real quick. Juan, tech person extraordinaire, just filling a lot of roles in this show. The comedic value that keeps us sane. Juan, you were here. We watched this movie together. Maybe you also don't have a hot take. I don't want to say a hot take. Give me your well-considered intellectual opinion in 2 minutes on the movie.
And go.
My hot take is the movie was good. I think like that's gonna be a hot take right now. Just saying that the movie is good is gonna be a hot take because people was so quick to like jump on it. I do think like, are you gonna like what do you expect from like AT&T? What do you expect from Warner Brothers? Like to put forward like a Marxist perspective of like the Black Panthers? Nah, like as Ciara likes to say, we gotta make cool stuff. I think this is like a PG show. We gotta make cool stuff. So like if we don't like the depiction of like the revolutionaries, then we gotta make stuff that depicts them the way that we think that they should be depicted. And if we can't do that, at the end of the day, we're like, what role do we play? Right, I think it's really important. This is a time where like Fred Hampton's name is being shared. People that have probably never heard of Fred Hampton before are hearing about him. And instead of like critiquing a film, we should be like building with those people, using this time to do political education, using this time to organize, using this time to like push the Black Panthers message to the forefront. Instead of like, you know, just like doing film critiques, which are cool. You know, I think we could sit down as comrades and talk about like the intricacies of things. But then at the end of the day, like how are we building movement? How are we pushing forward? And how are we using media and pop culture to do those things is important.
No, I hear you. Well, that is a very well considered opinion, and I appreciate you. It was interesting for us here to just be watching it as all people who have, also been engaging in so much progressive political activity and really tried to live in the legacy of Fred Hampton. I want to bring on our first guest here, who is, by the way, big thank you to her, appearing for the second week in a row on the Freedom side. That's Rosa Clemente. Many things I could say. She's an organizer, she's a journalist, she's a scholar, but also the first Afro-Latina woman to run for vice president in this country. But very importantly for this show, she was a producer on Judas and the Black Messiah. I have to say, one of the only reasons I started to feel comfortable about this movie is I saw her say something in the lead up to it, that she had worked on the film, and I said, okay, well, if they got Rosa on here,
right,
this might be something different than what everyone is saying it is. Do we have Rosa?
Yeah.
We do. No, you're good. Yeah, so I think that one of the things that, to me, is interesting about the moment we're in is that individuals who have legitimate struggle records are being asked to consult on a Hollywood film, which rarely happens. Usually somebody else is just making, they're just doing whatever they want to do. Maybe they hire some academic, but they had Fred Hampton Jr., obviously Rosa Clemente, who we just mentioned, a few other people. They had Lady of Rage make a cameo in there, which I was like, Lady of Rage, okay, yes. So it felt like it had the culture. Here we go, Rosa Clemente. Very happy to have you back with us, producer on Judas and the Black Messiah, among many other things. How you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm great. It's been a long, beautiful day right now. First and foremost, what I want to say is that, the Black Panther Party was the Black Panther Party for self-defense. So we do a disservice if we put the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, the American Indian Movement, the Brown Berets, or the Young Patriots within a civil rights context, because that's what ends up getting Jesse Jackson to claim the Rainbow Coalition with Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. that created that, and then I'll stop here and engage in questions. I do want everybody to go to Save the Hampton House. We have a problem in this country right now where many of our institutions or historical places are being either decimated, bowled over, gentrified. And, at the end of the day, if we're doing this work and we don't take down every monument around Christopher Columbus and colonizers and don't preserve the history of Emmett Till, Fred Hampton Jr., Albizu Campos, Lolita LeBron, we're doing a disservice in a historical sense, because those monuments will live long beyond us. So the important thing right now is that we have saved the Fred Hampton House in one way. But as anybody who owns a house knows, it always needs upgrades and maintenance. And in order for it to be put within a national parks historical site, a landmark, those upgrades need to happen very quickly. So I really appreciate that you are all pushing this throughout the show tonight.
Yeah, definitely. Save the Hampton House. .org.
Yep.
Please go, please donate, please support. And I'm really glad that you ended on that point, Rosa, because it really brought up at least my first question, or my first, well, I don't know, maybe it's not a great question, it's more of a comment, but seeing this movie right now seemed to me to be just super important. I mean, it just seems to me that this movie couldn't come out in this way if we weren't in a moment where transformative change feels real. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, this movie has been in the works for 3 years. Wow. So the original release date would have been this August, which would have been part of what we know in the United States as Black August, right? A history, a movement that was started within the San Quentin prison system. And then I can go all the way to my political home of the Malcolm X grassroots movement, where for almost 20 years we did and celebrated hip hop and freedom fighters within our Black August concerts, as well as our international exchanges. And it's interesting because as a historian, I am looking, did I freeze up? Okay. As a historian, I'm looking at the story, and this, I want to make sure that y'all could hear me because I look
Yeah.
like I'm frozen.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, you're great.
So as a historian, but also part of the Malcolm X grassroots movement, we've been doing these Black August concerts, and it's actually Shaka King, the writer and director, was told about Fred Hampton by a couple brothers called the Lucas Brothers, who are comedians, but also like kind of coming out of Brooklyn in that age of pre-gentrification and hip hop organizing and activism. And Shaka, when he reached out to me to see if I could get in touch with Brother Chairman Fred, he said, I went to the Black August concert in Brooklyn and I saw Chairman Fred Hampton speak. And at that time, I had done a tour with Chairman Fred and M1 of Dead Prez for 2 years after Chairman Fred was released after his incarceration. So I look at the trajectory of history and like, this is crazy, right? Like, I'm doing these concerts. I'm being politicized by Malcolm X grassroots movement. I'm beginning to understand my history as a Puerto Rican and the colonial, imperialist, and assassination history against my people. It's hip hop. We're doing these concerts, uplifting political prisoners, prisoners of war, our elders who are free, those that have passed away. And I had known Shaka through this larger collective called Blackout that Ryan Coogler and Avery DuVernay started. So when he hit me up, I was like, yo, for sure. And he's like, I went to that show. I was in college, and he asked me if I could get in touch. And I was like, yeah. And I told him from the beginning, I said, look, a lot of people have tried to make this movie,
Right.
And this is not a documentary, obviously, but it's going to take a lot of relationship building. And it did happen that way. Ryan's partner and production partner, Cindy, they're also married. We went to Chicago a lot. And the last meeting I was at was when Dominique fished back, because I want to give Dominique a lot of love. Any way that you look at this moment and movement, there's often erasure of women. And I think this is one of the first kind of mainstream movies that were like, yeah, it was Mother, Akua, and Jerry. They were, the thing that people also have to remember is that Mark Clark was also assassinated, and there were other Black Panthers, including Mother, Akua, and Jerry. And when people think about this, think about 100 bullets being shot. And she survived, 8.5 months pregnant. Fred Hampton Jr. was born 25 days after his father was assassinated. Now, that can only be the ancestors and the elders bringing it all together. You can't, we could break it down. We could be like methodical about it, but at the end, it all came together, So I just encourage people, it's a tool. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Make your own movie. Make your own documentary about all of us, period. Let's do that.
I feel you 100%. I mean, I've been racking my brain even thinking, I was like, how many movies have I ever seen in my life, and people know I love movies, where the word socialism was mentioned in any way, shape, or form that wasn't like, this is the worst thing ever. I'm pretty sure the only movie I've ever seen, except for maybe some Soviet film, where the word proletariat was uttered. And I'm sure a lot of people Googling that, like, that is amazing. I mean, Sierra, you were talking about this earlier, sort of like the political education of the movie.
Yes, I mean, within the movie I saw, which I feel like is so helpful, especially for folks who have been activated over the last summer and the uprisings, is really a need for leadership, cadre development, which I feel like the film showed a great deal of. I loved it, both within the classroom setting, but also in those different spaces, like when they're feeding the children, like when, Lakeith is like repairing the wall, like all of that has to do with cadre development and political education and keeping people connected to their communities, to the working class. I feel like so often people just see movement now is sort of like celebritism, you know, like let me get my blue check on Twitter and let me get my Beyonce on outside in my beret. But it's like, this is actually real work, the complete embodiment, moving, you know, mind, body, and spirit as one because of that, you know, attention to development and connectivity.
No, I think that's an important point. I mean, that's another thing about it that I thought, Rosa, that's just like Ryan Coogler's craft was amazing. Like one scene that really stood out to me was the scene where the Lords and the Panthers come together, where no words are exchanged, but just the fact of them kind of seeing each other.
At a funeral.
Yeah, you didn't need to really hear anything. You know what I mean? You didn't really need to hear anything. I thought it was powerful.
Yeah. Oh, and I also say I love that scene when they were with the Young Patriots. If folks haven't, you know, seen the actual scene, you can go on YouTube and find this 40-minute or so conversation. But in a world where to, you know, actually battle white supremacy looks like, let me take this class on being anti-racist and give me the certificate to say that I'm no longer racist. To be able to see revolutionaries go to poor white people, recognizing that we have similar interests, that we have a similar enemy, and actually building with those folks, I feel like it was a really good example of what we need to be doing in terms of really building and bringing the class together.
Yeah, Rosa, go ahead.
Yeah, and, you know, that's the important part about the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense and the Young Lords Party. They were also socialist organizations that believed that the revolution was here. You know, and I don't, you know, and Shaka King has talked about this, that in a way he put in William O'Neill because he that without that it might not get made, you know, on some like real stuff, right? Like that's not a secret, you know. And on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, me and Dr. Jared Ball did an interview with Brother Fred, and he said that, you know, there's a lot of focus on William O'Neill, but there were a lot of other infiltrators, a lot of other people that, you know, use the name and the work, particularly Congressman Bobby Rush, you know, that use this for their own personal gain and benefit. Obviously, secondly, I'm like, yes, finally there's a movie that not only shows the Young Lords Party, but it's like the Puerto Rican flag. And I've always tried to tell everybody working on the movie, you know, definitely I'm not one for just representational politics and visibility, but I understand the power of narratives. And the fact that this is the first mainstream movie where you not only see the Puerto Rican flag, you see the Young Lords, and that people need to understand that Chacha Jimenez, who Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. Basically was like, listen, turn this street organization to a political organization. Chacha Jimenez was on the set the days I was on the set. And it actually was the day where this incredible scene is filmed at the church. And I was sitting next to Charles King, one of the producers and really who made a lot of this happen. And Daniel came out and he did 1 of 16 takes that day. When people see this scene, that's the scene when you're like, yo, Chairman Fred, his spirit was right in Daniel's body. And me and Charles looked at each other and just started crying. Like, this is crazy. And then when you listen to Daniel and Lakeith give their interviews, Lakeith at first was like, yo, I don't want to play the snitch. Like, I don't want to play this dude. I want to play Chairman Fred. And they were like, no, we got that covered. You're going to play this. And seeing these actors and seeing Dominic Fishback, a young sister from East New York, embody the strength of a woman who was also like, yeah, you mad cute, but, you know, I'm trying to have the revolution happen, right? And last, I hope, this is a spoiler, there's one scene in the film where Brother Chairman Fred says, anywhere there's people, there's power.
That's right.
See, to me, that stands out the most. Anywhere we are at is power. And as a Boricua, as a Black Puerto Rican, as I identify, knowing this history, I'm like, yo, we again need to use this as political education, and all the critiques are welcome. And actually, Chairman Fred and the Black Panther Cubs and Mother Kua have their critiques. But at this moment, like, we're living through crazy times. And if we could feed people with some empowerment, unfortunately, we know how the movie ends, but it really never ends, right? They didn't get rid of Mother Kua. And Fred Hampton Jr. is here with us, teaching us right now at this moment.
You can kill a freedom fighter, but you can't kill freedom. I want to bring in Dr. Jared Ball, who we also have with us here of imixwhatilike.org. Very happy to have you here, Jared. I'm a little disappointed I didn't win anything in the Hater Awards, but I'm going to try to come back harder next year. I've been way too nice in 2020, and I realized I have failed. I appreciate you, brother.
I have mine from the past.
Well, let's see your response to my thoughts on the film, and you might earn one today. Because
well, give me your thoughts so I can get in there.
Let's go.
No, first of all, peace to everybody. It's good to join you. It's a pleasure, and as much as I often find myself in this position, you do still have to say that I hate that I have to be the one to say I disagree with a lot that I've heard. I didn't get the same feelings and vibes from the film, and I think the film, from the way it was set up structurally, to be told through O'Neill's character, made sure that, as Rosa pointed out, as Shaka has pointed out, in his interviews, it was understood that, I think as he points out, that they wanted to make The Departed with COINTELPRO. That was the way to do the film. And this reminds me of what Warner Brothers did back in the 90s with Malcolm X. I don't know if people will remember this, but Warner Brothers back then said that they wanted to make Malcolm X a popular brand like The Simpsons and Batman. And so what I think is important to remember, the reason I bring that up again, to remind that this is a Warner Brothers product. This is not a product of the community. This is not a product of the movement. This is something that they had to approve in their worldview to target audiences that they are wanting to draw in, which has been made clear historically are white affluent audiences. So we have to understand that this film wasn't made to inspire Black and brown people into revolution. I think it was made to tell a story of a Black revolution in a way that white affluent viewers will feel comfortable and won't, turn off or cancel their HBO subscriptions. So, and just very quickly, you all are right that they do some. First of all, it's very well acted. I think the story is very well told. I don't actually agree with some of the criticisms I've seen of the film in terms of the acting and the aesthetics. I thought all of that was extremely powerful and well done, which to me makes it a more difficult and challenging product. But if we just look at, they mention COINTELPRO, they do mention socialism. But to me, that's more akin to the way we saw Bernie Sanders talk about socialism over the last couple of years. It's not in a way that's authentic, that's inspiring, or in a way that I think actually teaches people what these ideas really are. I think Fred, as I predicted, was reduced to, being put in the background. Literally, the scene that Rosa's talking about, that powerful scene where Daniel's, he does seem to channel Fred, I thought, quite well. But if you remember, they peel back and you're literally seeing the point is to show you're seeing this from the point of view of William O'Neill. So as powerful as that is, the story takes you right back to O'Neill, and it's his character we see develop. It's his character we see grow. It's the white FBI agent's household and baby that we see. We don't see Fred's family. We don't see his parents. We don't see his growth. We don't see his childhood. We don't see anything about him at 14 in the NAACP, already showing up in intelligence agencies, reports. We don't see any of that. He's just reduced to, I think, more of a caricature. So yeah, we hear socialism, but it's in the context of speech making and pontificating. I don't get the idea that, I don't think we see enough of the actual political education or the grappling with those ideas. I'll stop there because I don't want to just keep going. I have much more to say, but I will say that if anything, the good news is, having now heard the soundtrack to the movie, the film is at least better than that, because the soundtrack is an abomination, I think, actually.
Let me not take up too much space, but you aren't talking too long. You know, we're always happy to make space for you.
I'm trying to clear the smoke out the air.
Rosa, go ahead, get in there.
Jeez.
So let me say this. Look, Jared Ball is one of my dearest comrades and friends. We've known each other since we both went to Cornell. And I welcome all the critiques, and he's absolutely right. Jared was one of the first people I called to be like, yo, I may be doing this. And in the last 3 years, he has taken every call. He has been like this, A, B, and C. I want to point that out because outside of this movie, what's happening right now at this moment for folks watching, this is what we call principled debate and critique. And I really want younger people, whether you're in the movement or not, to understand that we can have critique and debate without canceling and throwing away and making each other disposable. To me, that's been one of the blessings of this film, that I have comrades that take me to the next level as they stay steel, sharp steel, and I agree. I'm also very close to the project, It's been like being in labor for 900 days, and then it's here and you wake up and you're like, all right, the point of what we need to do as organizers as movement is be able to have all of this conversation all the way, always critically principled, and then figuring out, do we have common interests and things that we want to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So for folks that are going to hit me up and be like, Chad threw you under the bus, I'm like, yo, we've been rolling for almost 25 years. Like, we ain't throwing each other the bus. We've had many debates. No, I'm just saying, I'm saying that.
No, I'm just saying, I want to agree with you. And to be clear, I have a critique of the film, and I keep wanting to say, I think of it as a product. I don't have, and I want to, this to me is not, look, I love Rosa. I love Fred Jr. I love, obviously, Fred Hampton Sr. as a person I never met, but who's inspired my whole life. My radio show for 15 years, I literally played his voice and signed off, and still to this day say, to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred. So this is where I'm coming from with it, and with the critique and filtering it through a past experience and an analysis, but just a couple of things very quickly, if I could. One, first of all, Eugene, you're exactly right about Derek Luke and Catch a Fire and how that film ends. I just wanted to co-sign that. I made a note about that.
Thank you.
And to the point that my friend Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows raised in his criticism of the film, and Eugene, I think you would appreciate this. This film doesn't do Hampton justice in the way that, for instance, Reds did John Reed, John Reed, right? Was it Justice, right? In the same way, and then I was even thinking of the way that Benicio del Toro did El Che. I thought Che Guevara, in a much longer film, was given much more room to breathe and to see, this man develop. Whereas here we get the allusions to the power of Akua and Jerry and their relationship. We get allusions to the political education and the development. But the film, I think, very carefully and slickly reduces by only mentioning COINTELPRO briefly and not explaining what it was doing, not only to the Panthers, but to the entire left. And then it sort of slickly reduces the entire crisis of what was happening to Fred to one insane J. Edgar Hoover, who, as accurate as that may be, was still representative of a broader institution. I mean, he was still working, with, the Wild Bill Sullivans and all of those people. So it wasn't like he was the only one, but to as has been said by Kugler and King and others, the goal to humanize William O'Neill also spread to the humanization of the one white FBI agent, who we both see them struggling once they realize that the goal is to actually kill Fred Hampton, as if they hadn't already been seen, even in this movie, struggling with all of these assassinations and plots, as if we didn't already know what the counterintelligence program had already done and been involved with, as if King and Malcolm and the Kennedys and all these other folks had not already been assassinated. So this idea that this was going to be some shock of a conclusion, and that they would be shown as struggling with it, I think is again a slick way of trying to present this a very powerful and real history in a way that reduces the institutional imposition to, again, a few bad apples. And then lastly, I would just say, I think that I have no evidence of this, but I think the pushing release was more to almost to what as I interpret what Rosa was saying, has almost more to do with the desire to drag Fred away from that radical Black August tradition, to disassociate. In other words, it was literally too hot a moment in the summer to have a Fred Hampton film come out and actually be associated with Black August, as opposed to what we have had as this very commercialized, watered down Black History Month, with all of its routine, allusions again to the most, integrationist and civil rights aspects of it, of that history, and even the most watered down versions of those figures, as opposed to that more aggressive and militant history that many of us would associate Hampton with in that Black August tradition. So I think we have to be more critical, because we do find elements of these products that we like and find enjoyable, and try to try to recognize that we aren't the only ones involved with the production. We aren't the only ones who have an agenda. So when Rosa says we have to use this as a tool, I agree. But those who have produced this and have been in charge of manufacturing and distributing and earning the lion's share of the wealth from it, they also have an agenda and are using these as tools as well.
Sierra Taylor,
I would agree
notes?
with that, but
Rosa, go ahead.
I would agree with that, but I would disagree in this sense, right? Like, we would hope that people know things in the past, and like, we have an entire generation of young people that are in movements, visible or not, that their history begins with Ronald Reagan, and our generation and what we suffered under that. And it's a movie, y'all. It's a movie. And I understand the power of a movie. I also understand that I know for sure that Chairman Fred, struggled with this and is struggling with it right now, because there's, as there should be, critiques coming, so I'm in this like weird kind of crazy place where I'm like, well, at the end of the day, it's a Warner Brothers movie. Like, they're not trying to teach us how to get free. I've gone on the record being like, I don't think there should be any humanization for snitches and infiltrators, especially when we still have political prisoners and prisoners of war locked up. But I spent the last couple of days reaching out to some political prisoners that are free, and they've had the same critique. And one of them, though, told me today, like, yo, at the end, it's out there. It's what we do with it, So I'm in this kind of weird place of like, it ain't going to show us how to get free. It does tend to it does humanize O'Neill. The perspective is through them. People are going to be like, COINTELPRO, why is Martin Sheen playing J. Edgar Hoover? Who was he? And in the other sense, I'm also like, maybe I was supposed to be at this point and be at the table. Although, I don't have decision-making power of like what gets edited and all that done. So with that being said, because I know you're all going to have to move on soon, me and Dr. Ball will be on my Instagram page at about 8:30 and 45 minutes, really expounding on this discussion that we're having here. So.
Both y'all went to Cornell. I wish I could go back and like be in that crew. Sierra Taylor, you're taking some notes. Share some of your thoughts with us.
Well, first of all, I just really appreciated the exchange between you two and being able to practice, principled struggle and principled discourse, which I feel like is something that is missing from our movement, and us not really knowing how to communicate with each other. And so I just really appreciate seeing that. There is a saying that says that organizing is the art of the possible. And thinking about this film as a tool, and also thinking about the organizing terrain that we're in today, given the uprisings that were happening over the summer, given the global pandemic, the economic crises, What do you think is actually possible in this moment, and in terms of using this film, the history, the mystique around it? Like, what is possible for us to actually use this as organizers in this moment? What lessons should we glean from this film?
Well, I don't know about
for me.
the film.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Rosa, then
No,
Jen, please.
I don't know about the film, but I would say that right now we're not in a good situation as people of color, and as people living under the system of capitalism. This whole farce of this trial, the fact that right now there's brothers and sisters, non-binary folks probably being arrested all over this country for having a joint, and this maniac and his criminal syndicate are about to walk away. What I would say is right now, like January 6th was the rallying call for white nationalism and neo-Nazis, or the new rallying call from them. And that if people don't understand that at this point, this two-party system, this duopoly, this corporate duopoly is not only horrific, that it is also embedded with white nationalists and CIA, and the fact that I'm seeing a lot of younger people of color be like, how could this happen? I'm like, what are you talking about? This is how it's always happened. It's America. The American project is a failure from the beginning. So I'm not sure what the movie does for that. I know that at this moment, we need to be hardcore in organizing and building some type of political conscience. Like, all of this needs to be dismantled at this point. We cannot romanticize what happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and that we don't put the freedom of political prisoners and prisoners of war as our forefront struggle, then we've done a disservice to our ancestry, period.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. Jared.
Well, I mean, for me, I think it's important, to start at least with the media criticism, to understand what is the function of media in this society, that this society is basically only being held together by propaganda at this point, and barely at that, as people are increasingly forced to come to terms with the horrific contradictions of our material reality. So to me, this is sort of the point of these products, that with this understanding that there is a need for people to see some version of themselves, and including radicals to see some versions of themselves, and to see people pushing for something, that a film like this would be not only greenlit and developed over a few years and then released at a certain time, is to me more suspicious than anything to be celebrating. And I think I've seen why in terms of what the film messaging is trying to do. So I think that the critique the point would be for me to use the film to say, here's all of what could have happened or could have been told, or other or perspectives that could have been brought to bear. And then, of course, if we're serious about, if in fact I'm wrong and people are taken by the messaging in a way that I'm not seeing, and say, well, we want to move towards radical militant organization and certainly socialism and things like that, then certainly we should see an increased call for a freeing and a return home of our political prisoners. And we would see people saying, we're going to get more involved in the struggles around Sundiata Acoli and Mutulu Shakur, and we're going to get more involved around the bringing home of Asada, who's just had her, bounty upped again, or the threat on her upped again. We would see people embracing, in other words, movements here to redistribute, to get free healthcare. In other words, I see in this moment of tremendous crisis an opportunity. Not to be cliched about it, but that if we're going to suffer this way, then we should be thinking in any number of wild and radical and militant ways, and we should resist any effort from the mainstream or the dominant institutions of this society to blunt that energy in as much as I think was tried to do in this film. I mean, even what was done, I noticed that even the same slick little thing was done in this film that was done in Nate Parker's Nat Turner film, which is, I think, a pattern where we see hours of Black suffering. We see the Black people getting shot and killed and dragged and hung and raped and all of this. But when it comes time to depict the violence against the oppressor, that never happens on screen. So even in this film, we see black people getting shot all over the place. And in the one moment where there is a revolutionary violence returned against the police, they cut to black and, as if, again, to tell the white affluent audience, we're going to spare you this because we know that's not what you've come to see. In the same way, we could see a film ostensibly about Nat Turner's rebellion and never see any of the so-called violence meted out against the oppressor that has so made him such a legend, or that struggle such a legend. And I'm not just saying I want to see white suffering in that way, although, if we're telling a film, we're doing it, being honest, then do it all the way. But what I am saying is that are subtle projections of what the film's intent is actually to be. And then again, I think if people follow up by listening to the soundtrack, and I think, there's a lot of messaging coming out that's meant to be contradictory here is really the point I'm getting at. And I think ultimately it's meant to quell the very righteous rebelliousness that many of us feel and that we see in the streets and that we should see more of in a more organized fashion.
No, I really appreciate both of y'all, and I hope the contradictions can move us forward in the way society should. Jared Ball, Rosa Clemente, very honored to have y'all give us a little bit of time and your thoughts on Judas and the Black Messiah. Thanks for so much for coming on the Freedom Side.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And thank you for coming in 2 weeks in a row, Rosa. Thank you.
Well, what y'all are doing right now, and as a hip hop generation folks, I'm like, all right, maybe we did something right to see incredible younger people like you really understanding, but hitting on the issues for real, and I look forward to supporting you in this process. So thank you for having me.
No, I appreciate you. And just for you to know, it was a lot of those Black August pieces. I was in Central Virginia and was connecting through the hip hop world to this whole thing that woke me up to, or at least give me entree into a lot of this. So I appreciate y'all as well. And I'm looking forward to checking out that Instagram piece.
And Eugene, of course, when you're vice president, then I'll run for president again. I'm going to keep saying that.
I'm on that ticket. I'm ready.
Let's do it.
All right, y'all. Be good.
All right, peace.
Moving on, we are very honored to be joined here by Eddie Conway, who, there's many things I could say. He's an executive producer with the Real News Network. He was a leader of the Black Panther Party in Baltimore, and he was a political prisoner for 44 years. Really, in some ways, I don't even know there's so many superlatives I want to list, but let's just bring him on. Eddie Conway, really appreciate you joining us here on the show.
Hey, how you doing? I'm glad y'all doing this work.
Man, I'm doing well. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us. I guess my first question about a movie like this is, as someone who was there, who was in it, how do you feel seeing something like this being made? I don't know if you had a chance to watch it. Did you like it? I'm just curious, your just general thoughts, really.
Okay, well, I don't have a strong critique of it. I watched it. I've seen it. And I know it did a fairly broad surface kind of presentation of Chicago and Fred Hampton and so on. I think probably, and Jerry Ball probably said it all, and so did Rosa, and both of them, I love both of them, and constructive criticism is good. I think the things that were left out kind of struck me, and I'll just give one example. When they mentioned that Fred was going to go back to jail for 2 to 5 years because he stole $70 worth of ice cream, I think the fact that it was left out that he didn't steal $70 worth of ice cream, he forced the ice cream man to give ice cream to children in that neighborhood on a hot summer day, and they didn't have any money. And he said, well, give the ice cream out. And he got in trouble for it. But that was about taking care of the people, taking care of the children, and taking care of the community. It's stuff like that that's left out that give you an impression, well, shit, he stole ice cream. He was a criminal. He was supposed to be on his way back to jail. When in reality, that was all part of his struggle. The fact that he was young, the fact that O'Neal was young, the fact all of them were young, in fact, he was 20, 21, O'Neal was 20. They were all young, but they looked like they were depicted as if they were hard seasoned and cold adults. And I think probably part of that is that it didn't give a sense to how young the Black Panther Party's membership was mainly young people, and it was mainly women on top of that. And they were professional people, but they were young people from high school, young people just starting into college, uh, young people just from the the neighborhood itself. I don't think you got that. I mean, the youth was there. You got a couple people ran in here and there, and you seen them work on the rebuilding the party structure that had been burned down. But I think the things that was left out is the things that we as activists, organizers, like your program is doing there, we need to critique those things, but we need to talk to people, young people. We need to put on forums. We need to have panels. We need to talk about it. It's there. It's Hollywood. Hollywood did what it did, and it's always going to do what it do. We could take that product, and we need to use that product, and we use it for education. It's like we're saying, like Jared said, we're not talking Bernie Sanders kind of socialism. That's not what Fred was saying. We're not talking Jesse Jackson's kind of rainbow coalition. That's not what Fred was doing. And we need to convey that and communicate with that and critique it and use it. Use it as a product to communicate and educate.
I think I agree with you 100%. I mean, I feel like all these, it's an opportunity, people thinking and talking about things. Speaking of Fred specifically, one thing I'm always curious about, Eddie, is what was the impact Fred was having on you all at the time? I mean, I think obviously, today, young people today, everything's on the internet, everyone knows everything all around the country. Obviously, there was mass media, but a little bit different. But what was your consciousness of Fred there in Baltimore, and what was his impact on y'all if there was any, I'm sure there was some, on y'all as Panthers in Baltimore?
Fred had a really strong influence on the chapters all across the 37 states where we existed at. Fred he was young, but he was a dynamic organizer. His charisma was that he loved people, and that's one of the things, unfortunately, the film talks about his love, but the actor kind of portrays him as kind of cold and rough and hard. Where when you seen Fred, you seen all those dimples, and those dimples, even when he was talking about dying for the people and the revolution and whatnot, you seen those dimples. Those dimples come from the fact that Fred was always smiling. He was always outgoing like that. People had to listen to him because they could see that he genuinely loved, and it wasn't a anger that motivated him. It was a love that motivated him, and that's the difference between how that character was portrayed. And I said I wasn't going to critique this, but and who he was, and I think his death was a tremendous shock to the whole Black Panther Party apparatus, But prior to that, we had already experienced Bunchy, Carter, John Huggins' death, Fred Bennett's death. We had experienced a number of people had already been assassinated or jailed or ran out of the country by that time. And in fact, the part I think that, and it's Hollywood, the director and the producer's option to do that. But the fact is that the COINTEL program destroyed the Black Panther Party in 18 months. It destroyed 25 state chapters in 18 months, which effectively killed the party. And it started right before Fred, and it went right through Fred until after Huey got out. And basically destroyed the Black Panther Party, that program. And I don't think you see that because it says, they went on to do this and do that, but effectively it was destroyed. And it wasn't just an individual, the whole entire apparatus was destroyed. And I think it's important to educate and tell people that. And it's like Jared said, and it's certainly like Rosa is saying, this is not new. This started for us, people of color, indigenous people, Black people, brown people, etc. This started 500 years ago, and it's continuing. And this is just a new phase of it. What happened at the Capitol, in effect, is nothing new. Working together with law enforcement, badges on in the daytime and hoods on at night, that is not new. All of this stuff represents the power of capitalism in terms of protecting property and keeping us divided, distracted, or put down a path of reform. Whether it's the war on poverty or whatever it is, the next round is coming, like we're going to have some reform, we're going to do this, and y'all go back in your house and everything will be okay. No, not as long as you continue to exploit the resources of the world and the resources of the American people. So we got to use this and educate with it.
Mm-hmm. Sierra?
Yeah, I was just thinking, and thank you so much, Eddie. I'm really excited for you to be on the show, and I'm just happy to hear you talk all the time. Something that I've been thinking about, especially when delving into this history of the 1960s and 1970s, is that oftentimes this history is looked at as just sort of this cultural revolution, leather jackets, the Black Power fist, the berets, and the hippie dippies doing whatever. But what I really appreciate about this film is that it really captured this sense, at least for me, and maybe I'm just reading into it and because I'm a nerd and I really love this history, but I feel like it captured this sense of feeling that revolution was actually possible in that moment. I mean, just thinking, how it wasn't that long ago, and the fact that capitalism has even developed, since then. The capitalist project wasn't a global project at this point in time. And so there was, I guess I'm just saying how I would feel, but there was this sense that we could make an intervention and stop it. And I think that right now, similarly, as capital pretty much is running out of ways to save itself, maybe it always figures out a way. And feeling that revolution is possible in this moment, what could you share for folks in this moment to be able to see those cracks where revolution is possible and being able to take up, what kind of leadership needs to be taken up in this moment and organization?
Mm-hmm. And I'll go back and I'll agree with you. I think in the 60s, the mid 60s, early 70s, it was a sense that revolution was possible around the world. Countries were fighting for their liberation, whether in Mozambique or Angola or Southwest Africa. Some countries have already won their liberation, like in Algiers. The fight was going strong in the Vietnam. The students in Europe was rising. The students in South America was rising. There was a sense the miners, people were organizing in Africa. So there was that worldwide sense. And of course, the backlash to all that was, in all too many cases, either neo-colonialist kind of apparatuses or deals, whether you're talking about Kenya or whatever, to distract and at the same time kill the prominent leaders. Not starting with Patrice Lumumba, but around the world, killed the most prominent leaders that they could assassinate and put their apparatus in place and roll back that. we're at that stage again today in world politics. And the fact of the matter is, even though we're talking globalization, we're talking a massive amount of poverty across billions of people that's forced to live on $2 a day. We're talking a threat to the environment, climate change. We're talking a threat to the planet itself. Uh, and we're talking the last kind of hurrah, or at least it's always the last hurrah. Hopefully, this is the last hurrah of white supremacy that's being used by the ruling class to distract us and to implement fascist arrangements so that we can fight among ourselves, like in France, say, uh, um, with the Yellow Jackets. If we're not looking closely at who they are, we'll miss the fact that they're fascists and they're using the population. Or in Spain, where they have just kind of like flexed their muscles around the world. And most of that stuff, as quiet as it's kept, it's coming out of America, just like Hitler's Nazi Germany came out of America. It didn't come out of Mussolini's Italy or any of that stuff. It came out of West Virginia. Well, not West Virginia, Virginia, America. It came out of America, and they took lessons from America, and they took lessons from Canada, and they went back and they created the Nazis, and with the eugenics and so on. And it's still happening today. And what we don't see, even though we see the nuts running into the Capitol, we don't see the evangelist right. We don't see the promise keepers. We don't see the suits and ties. We don't see the militias that numbers in a million collectively that are pretty much all white and are well armed. Those things are in the background. We're looking at the clowns, the brown shirts right now. We need to be thinking in terms of building apparatuses to protect ourselves. We need to feed ourselves, to take care of ourselves in terms of health care. We need to be building institutions that will help us go into the future, because there's going to be blowback from us saying, I can't breathe. Of all the things to get blowback from, but if you have the audacity to say, don't shoot, then it's something wrong with you. There's going to be blowback. And we have to think in terms of Fred Hampton's rainbow coalitions. We have to think in terms of not pyramid structures, but horizontal structures in terms of organizing and protecting ourselves so we don't expose leaders and so that we don't get picked off here and there or pitted against each other. We have to be able to organize in manners that's different from how the Panthers, the movement, the Young Lords, the Patriot Party, etc., organized in the past. We need to find, and I think young people are doing that. I'm encouraged, and I understand that they are starting to learn that there's always been this dual relationship with the police in terms of how they deal with white supremacy and how they deal with black protests. And that's going to create political prisoners. And talking about political prisoners, and then I'll shut up in 1 second. We can't forget Rap Brown. We can't forget Leonard Peltier. We can't forget Sunday out there Cola, who is like 80 some years old now. We can't forget, and we need to start thinking of them, and young people need to start thinking of them, because at some point they're going to be in those cells. And I'm going to stop right there.
No, I think that's critically important. I always try to stress to people that there is no liberation struggle without your political prisoners. I mean, you couldn't even imagine the Palestinian movement or the Irish liberation movement without the political prisoners at the forefront. I think we need to remember that. Couple quick things. I just want to remind people, we are asking everyone to go to savethehamptonhouse.org. Savethehamptonhouse.org. The house itself is the house that Fred Hampton grew up in as a child. There are a lot of plans to make it into a museum, just a place where Fred Hampton's legacy can really live in a real way. So savethehamptonhouse.org. please go make whatever donation you can. They're also doing hashtag Save the Hampton House, so do what you can to spread the word about the fact that there is an effort ongoing to turn Fred Hampton's childhood home into a vessel for his legacy today. We want to bring in another guest here. We are very honored to be able to bring on Jalen Kobayashi, who is a freedom fighter and organizer with, I have to say, one of my favorite groups, Good Kids Mad City out of Chicago.
Hey.
Jalen, how you doing? Thanks for joining us.
What's going on, y'all? How you feeling? Thank you, Papa Eddie Conway, for bringing me in. Thank you for your time and your love and sharing that experience with us and that perspective with us today. I'm doing great, though, y'all. How y'all feeling?
I mean, you know, a lot of feelings. I mean, I'm feeling good.
All the feelings.
We're going back and forth. Some people love the movie. Some of us, you know, didn't like it as much. I liked it. You know, Jared Ball had critique. It's a lot of different pieces. But, I mean, just give me some of your thoughts. You're there on the ground in Chicago, probably in some of the same neighborhoods. How are you feeling about the film?
I'm in the same neighborhood. I'm 2 blocks from Fred Hampton's house.
Wow.
I live 2 blocks from Fred Hampton's house. Yeah, and it's the same stuff that go on every day. We'll talk about the movie, but on the ground in Chicago, I've been working with Good Kids Mad City in Bronzeville since July 2020. Officially, we've been standing out every Thursday from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, handing out free food, PPE, and fresh produce boxes. And we've stopped gun violence, we've stopped carjackings, which are now up in the 300s in Chicago every single time that we step outside on 51st. So much of what the Rainbow Coalition is, much of what the Non-Aggression Pact is, right, which a lot of people don't know that Fred Hampton also championed the Non-Aggression Pact as well. We're working on that with what one of our documents is, the Peace Book Ordinance, to literally pay and incentivize gangs to stop the violence, but not just appease, right, and to start an institution, and a non-institution really, but an institution, right, of love, and an institution of abolition and peace, right, and that is our practice. So when it comes down to, you know, mutual aid efforts, when it comes down to the Peace Book, we're not being, you know, able to work with a lot of politicians on it. You know, we're very much so like the Panthers on our own.
Well, you know, I definitely appreciate that, and maybe in some ways that might be okay, given what we see a lot of these politicians, especially. Well, I don't want to say too much, but I see some of who y'all are dealing with out there in Chicago.
Look,
the mayor,
Lori Lightfoot, Lori Lightfoot. We could talk about it. Lori Lightfoot, it's all good.
I don't want to say it's a bait and switch because people knew, but I mean the idea that she was going to bring some major change and now seems to be doing just the thing. I mean, maybe talk about that a little bit, Jalen. The continuity between Chicago then and Chicago now in terms of these corrupt political leaders.
I mean, you know what's so funny is, you know, after Daley, right, we've had Daley, he created the downtown that we know and love, right, created a lot of these redlining and gerrymandering issues that we have with gentrification right now and violence in the city. But when it comes to continuities, I'm looking at, right, and not in the movie because the movie didn't do a good job of capturing this necessarily, but I'm looking at spots, right, where the free breakfast program was, and I'm walking through it, right. Every day I pass Fred Hampton's mural on California and Madison, while I also look at substance abuse happening. I look at shootings happening. I look at no funding. I look at no community centers. I look at no grocery stores. So I'm looking like, wow, we're actually working with the same materials, right? And when we quote Fred saying that, you know, it's ground zero for revolution, we're starting at ground zero for revolution. We've been at ground zero, right? Mayor Lori Lightfoot is part of a machine, right, that has existed in Chicago since, you know, it was taken from Jean-Baptiste Pont-du-Sable, right? And, you know, what she's doing is fulfilling her role in identity politics, right? Making it seem as though a black woman, right, will come save us, a black gay woman will come save us out from ourselves, in which she doesn't even talk to black kids or brown youth or whoever she claims to talk to. And we see the same things going on with J. Edgar Hoover right now, right? This summer, she had me singled out and beaten at a protest and arrested, right? So this summer, she had black women at protests, beaten and singled out and arrested, named by the police, right? We're not going to call it Hooveristic, right? We're not going to call it what it is. We're not going to call it machine politics to try to stop the revolution, right? The counter-revolution. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that politicians still deprioritize black and brown futures, black and brown lives, by trying to send kids back to school during CPS right now with a pandemic with 3 new deadly strains of the coronavirus, while white kids are getting vaccinated up north. Kids on the west side and south side are dying as well, right? And then you also have a major polluter being moved into the southeast side right now. Right, so there's multiple spiritual, right, factors of this warfare going on right now that we're facing with politics in Chicago, that all the people who are too scared to vote for treatment not trauma, vote for peace book, vote for welcome city ordinances, are supporting the mayor, right, and helping to propagate this notion that black and brown, we have to play checkers, right, we have to play all these games to get our freedom, which is not, that's not feasible, that's not what we believe, right.
Hey, well, go off, Jalen. All right, so what did you actually think about the film? Not to change subject, but
I respect it. You out here organizing the people with the platform.
I was like, let me sign your petition. What's going on?
No, that's all love. You know what I will say? So I'll be honest and I'll be fair. You know, like principle discussion, like Miss Rosa said earlier. Shout out to Rosa. You know, I personally, you know, have a bias because I'm outside, right? I'm outside doing this shit. But it's also like there was I couldn't even as much as I tried to watch it with an open mind, even as much as I tried to watch it like, okay, this is what's going on. Like it's cinema, it's cinematography, it's shot, right? We have the soundtrack. I can't help but notice the discontinuities with what Fred Hampton said, right? With first the dehumanization of Fred Hampton through this movie. There was nobody on the west side of Chicago who is black who could be casted for this movie. Is that what we're coming to? Who is between the ages of 13 and 21, right? Who could have, you know, theoretically played the role and brought us a younger, you know, version of somebody. They showed the shooting of multiple people, multiple random shootings, as well as the final shooting, which I just thought was a little bit distasteful because of, I mean, this summer getting shot at by police, you know what I'm saying? So it was very much so like a disconnect of what's really going on with, you know, what people think is really going on. I will say, you know, I did like the cinematography. I think Daniel Kaluuya did his shit, period. Shout out Daniel Kaluuya. You know, you did your shit, bro. I'm not gonna lie. With that being said, like Papa Eddie said, we're gonna have to be very strategic in how we propagate this movie, because this is the first time a lot of people are learning about the Panthers. This is the first time a lot of people are learning about Fred Hampton. This is the first time people are learning about Assata Shakur, Deborah Johnson, right? So when it comes down to educating our people, which Fred Hampton was very, very, you know, emphatic about, we have to make sure that we're not misleading them, right, with this first presentation of martyrdom, right? And this is what black trans radicals talk about a lot, right? Anarchists, right? We talk about the idea that, you know, a lot of our rebels at first, a lot of these shorties who's outside shooting these guns and carjacking, right? They're rebels. They're revolutionaries, right? They have misdirected anger and they have misdirected, you know, psyches, but they're revolutionaries. However, they're being called to martyrdom too soon. And I think that movie kind of portrayed, right, Fred Hampton as a martyr in a way that he should not be, right? Fred Hampton wanted to be on the New York Yankees. Fred Hampton wanted to play baseball, right? Fred Hampton wanted to do all of these amazing things with his life besides, right, be a martyr who died for the people. He got very radical, right, after reading and after being in the streets. And I will say after reading and being in the streets, because Fred did not just read and say that's it, right? But you know, so I think it was, you know, kind of shaky for me in that point. But I do think, you know, it's good that we're starting these conversations now with people who otherwise would have never seen them. I think that the way in which America, you know, commercializes Black death is still going to, you know, win in its game this time. So that clock has to stop soon. You know, that has to stop ASAP. But when we can really find out how, and I think it commented on the movie, right, when he goes to see Jake Winter's mom, right? We comment on the spiritual warfare. We comment on the what about your kids, right? But like Papa Eddie said, where are Fred's kids? Where's Fred's family? Fred had a family. Fred had people. Fred had friends, right? People that was in his ear telling him what's going on, right? So I think, you know, knowing the history and then also being part of the history right now, it's definitely going to be a different story for me as opposed to my little brother, who I'm also going to make sure, you know, knows about the movie, right? I would never send it out. But then we think about, right, and I'll wrap it up. I've been talking. But then I want to talk about the psychological, right? The soundtrack is full of black capitalists, Jay-Z, right? You got Nipsey Hussle, R.I.P. Nipsey Hussle, right? You got all of these black capitalists. You have all of these people who make music that is misogynistic and is hateful against black women and against dark-skinned people and against fat people, right? So we look at all these intersectional issues, and I'm not going to put anything on G Herbo or Dirk because they're from Chicago. That's my city, right? But where were their mentors? Right, where was their care outside of the music industry? That's the same thing with the organizing industry, the nonprofit industrial complex, right? We're expected to go in. I'm 20 years old. I'm expected to know everything. I'm expected to know how to organize for a spiritual, biblical war that I'm fighting right now, right? That's not feasible. So I think that, you know, and all in all, that just kind of, it's a slippery slope to walk across, right? When you're trying to propagate something and create, the culture for something, So that's just kind of how I felt about it.
No, I appreciate that for sure. Eddie Conway, a lot's been said here. I don't really have a question per se, but I'm just curious your thoughts maybe on where the conversation's going.
I love this young man. I mean, this,
Right?
this is, I couldn't hope for better. There were times throughout decades when it looked like we had fallen asleep during the 80s, the crack cocaine, the epidemics, and so on. But I always knew that young people were out there. This is the best representation I could see. I'm actually encouraged. Thank you. That energy, that fire, that insight, but that practice, theory and practice. And, continue to work. And if it's something I can do or help or aid in any kind of way, call on me.
Look, now that we got the line of communication open, for surely, that's what's definitely been needing to go on, for sure. Thank you, Papa.
Okay.
I was wondering, sorry, I was just talking to Eugene, because I think that I came up through anti-police brutality against like the school to prison pipeline, and I feel like coming up from organizing, in my teenage years to now, I feel as though something that I really wished someone would have talked to me about sooner is the role of the state. I feel like I spent so much time in my early, years of organizing, and still I'm trying to figure it out, right? But just going battle with the cops and not really understanding the whole system that is actually using the police as this weaponized arm of, keeping control of their interest and maintaining profit. And so I appreciated this film. I wish that it would have shown more of this about how the state colluded to assassinate Fred Hampton in the same way that it did MLK, the same way that it did Malcolm X, JFK, where you have all these different elements of the state. You have the FBI, you have the local police department in Chicago. I'm sure you had some other factors in there. But could you talk a little bit more about, I guess, just the role of the state and why it is so important that organizers, especially young people, are able to identify our enemy in that?
Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yes, I will say. Oh, go ahead. Did you have something?
No, go ahead, please.
Bet it up. Yeah. So I think one, I realized that this summer, right, and that this is gonna sound ironic, but like I realized that this summer as I'm in jail. Because as I was in jail,
that'll do it.
I was literally you know what I'm saying? I'm in jail and I'm really just like, damn, I was planning to get like a tattoo that night. I was like, I'm gonna go, get high, eat a pizza or something. You feel me? Have a great time. And then, I'm in 51st precinct. But what I realized is the police are the worker ants, right? They're the minions, right? Like you said, they're the long arm of the state, right? They are the enforcers. So when it comes to our head-on, right, physical bloodshed, the attrition that's going to come, we're always going to lose that one. They have military-grade equipment. That's how we have military-grade equipment. How you think these shorties got 50-round clips on these corners, baby? They didn't get that from Russia.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They didn't get that from over there. So the state is getting that, right? The state is funding that. The state is funding terrorism, right? You look at what happened on January 6th. That was a state-funded event. Mm-hmm. Those are people who own corporations who are literally writing off LLC to finesse millions of people out their money right now.
Come on.
That's the state. The state is Jeff Bezos being able to get up to a point of nearly $1 trillion and then stepping down as CEO so that he can get a better, higher paying job. You know what I'm saying? And not talking about that. And then Mackenzie Scott, his wife, being inspired by Good Kids Mad City to do mutual aid and then not doing a single thing in Chicago with Good Kids Mad City. So it always looks like the colluding, like you said, I love that word, colluding, right? People who are plotting and scheming on the low and are trying to actively overthrow us. That is the state. The state is signing a $13.1 billion budget in Chicago right now that has no proposed solutions to prevent gun violence. But we have $12 million that was just allocated to police for speed cameras and license plate readers, right? When the DMV is closed. So now you have people who cannot go get their license renewed, who are going to go to jail, who are going to sit in jail and get COVID at the COVID hotspot, which is Cook County Jail, right? We can go on and on and on, but that is the state, right? The state is not the person down your block who killed your friend, right? That is hurtful. That is shit that we go through. I just lost somebody to gun violence, like very, very recently, last month. That my brother, right? Long live Punyan. I'm not going out and going to find who did it, right? I'm understanding that that's a privilege, right? That's a privilege. So let me not even tweak on my siblings like that. If you follow consequences like that, we have learning to do. But at the same time, me at the state that I'm in, I'm understanding that he was selling weed. Why was he selling weed? Because he couldn't get a job during COVID. Why couldn't he get a job during COVID? Because all of these frontline jobs, right? We put the 2 and 2 together and we get 5 every time. It's not fair, right? They're adding stuff to it. They're adding variables to our livelihoods, right? I watch the police sit out on my block every day. I have a police light on my corner. Sit on my block every day, and yet there's carjackings in this neighborhood going all the time. There's people walking in and out the alleys who are overly high, overdosing on whatever the fentanyl, whatever the case is, right? Not getting any mental health treatment, not getting any food, not getting any sleep. So we have physiological needs that are usurped by the state, right? That we will never reach by fighting each other or fighting the police, right? That's not going to get it.
Eddie Conway, we've already impinged on so much of your time. I really appreciate you sticking with us, but I want to just ask before we switch gears a little bit here, and Jalen, stick with us if you can. Would love to bring you into conversation with our next guest. But Eddie Conway, just any final words?
Yeah, I would, of course. I would say, the state is actually not in conclusion. The state's not part of a scheme to operate against us. The state has been developed by the ruling class to do its bidding, and the state is the same people, like I said before, that at night they have on their sheets, or they have on their uniforms, or they have on their white supremacist outfits. They're the same people. In the daytime, they pass laws. At night, they pass terror. But they are working to cohesion or whatever that is. I messed that word up. But the state, and this is one thing that I might disagree with Sister Rosa about, is that the American apparatus is not failing. It's working exactly like it was designed to work. It was designed to remove the indigenous population. It was designed to enslave the black population. It was designed to work and exploit the other populations of colors. And it was also designed to exploit the white population, but at the same time, turn all of us against each other. And it's working like that, and it's part of that apparatus of oppression. It always have been, and it always will be. It will always work for the ruling class. Even now, there's this whole circus down in the Capitol about the stimulus package. It don't have to be a circus. They could pass that thing yesterday, or 2 days ago, or a week ago. But they make it into a circus to make it seem like the state is working for us. It's not working for us. It's working for the ruling class, and it's buying time, and it's trying to put us back to work and jeopardize the life first of our children, and then later on of our what they call essential workers, which we know are black and brown bodies.
Well, Eddie, I really appreciate you. For those who just tuned in, that is Eddie Conway, former Black Panther, former political prisoner for 44 years, executive producer at The Real News. Thanks so much for being with us.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Y'all
absolutely.
take care.
We want to bring now into the conversation Sean Blackman, certainly a friend of the show, host of By Any Means Necessary, does many different things, also with the Stop Police Terror Project, DC. Some would mention that he's a graduate of Florida A&M University. There are people who are all about that. But nevertheless, Sean,
just because Ryan Coogler didn't go to Howard, you don't have to be all salty.
Well, Sean, why don't you go ahead and say how you were very happy that finally someone from FAMU has reached escape velocity in terms of knowledge in the world.
Help me out over here, Sean.
Oh, Sean, you're muted.
Oh, my bad.
You good.
But yeah, I mean, you said something about escape velocity. I mean, look, Kwame Kilpatrick got off. That looked like escape velocity to me. But, I appreciate y'all having me on as always. And, both you, Eugene, of course, and my fellow rattler, Sierra Taylor. Always good to see her. In terms of Judas and the Black Messiah, I really considered it two ways. One, how did it strike me as a piece of entertainment, and what were the politics of it, right? Which I think is really the meat of what we're talking about this evening. And as a movie, as a piece of cinema, I thought it was pretty successful. It was well cast. It was well acted. The atmospherics of it, if you will, I thought were on point. All of that was cool, and it was cool to see Preacher Man Fesperman and the Young Patriots on screen. It was cool to see Cha-Cha Jimenez and the Young Lords on screen. Part of that revolutionary movement at that time. And so in terms of the politics of it, I've been interested to see how it's sort of been striking the popular consciousness at this point, even though it just came out. And because I feel like, honestly, what we saw, the way I received it was like a rehabilitation of William O'Neill. And as the audience, we're put in a position to feel sympathetic for this cat who helped set up Fred Hampton to be killed. I mean, the New York Times called him misguided. Peniel Joseph wrote an opinion piece in CNN saying that O'Neill was tortured. Like, really? He was tortured? Like, the Panther offices were, raided and blown up, and you had informants murdering and torturing people, and he's tortured. What really got me was in the Atlantic, this one writer called O'Neill an anti-hero. An anti-hero. I mean, the Punisher is an anti-hero. Spawn is an anti-hero. Stone Cold Steve Austin is an anti-hero. William O'Neill is a villain. Period. You feel what I'm saying? Yep. And the fact that, and what that left me with is that even though Fred Hampton, that David Kaluuya just killed it, I thought. Even though he's very present, he feels ancillary to the story. And by extension, his politics and the movement that he represented feel marginal. You know what I'm saying? And even when they take those beautiful revolutionary words from Fred Hampton, that he said verbatim, that, we don't fight capitalism with black capitalism, we fight capitalism with socialism. Such a gorgeous sentiment rang hollow to me in this film. And so what then is the effect? What is the impact on the consciousness? And I do want to say that one thing that I did find interesting about this film, because usually in popular representations of revolutionary figures, there's only a cursory acknowledgement of the role of the state and the FBI and COINTELPRO and things like this. Like, we just seen, what's the name? Night in Miami, right? The only, here Malcolm X, someone who's been under surveillance for years, but we only see like a couple of white guys looking sketchy outside the window when he was looking through the blinds like twice in the thing. And so the fact that Judas and the Black Messiah starts off just with that villainous, devilish, grotesque, repugnant demon of a man known as J. Edgar Hoover, and how he becomes such a part of it, is a complete flip of that, to where now the state is the star of the film. And that's the wild part of it. And so, I personally would encourage people to see it, because when we have these images put before us, we have to grapple with it. So, when Beyonce comes and does her halftime show with the berets and all and the Panther thing, I mean, folks can get upset about it, or we can take it as an opportunity to do some of that political education that we all think is possible. And I think this is a similar thing. And talk about, well, what was that Rainbow Coalition that Hampton was putting together. And how do we see the value in the comradeship that they were showing towards one another? Not allyship, because that's a popular concept in the movement. I mean, I find it to be frankly, a hollow, guilt-driven, self-flagellating sort of concept that doesn't really get us anywhere. How do we deal with each other on a deeper level to understand that we do have some skin in the game, and that when we struggle, we're not doing it as a favor to someone, but we're doing it to understand how these systems of oppression and exploitation impact us as well. And although it may be differently, certainly Black folks, Puerto Ricans, poor white folks from Appalachia, they experienced this in very different ways, but they understood the root of that of their oppression was the capitalist system, was imperialism, was white supremacy, and they used that as a point of broad-based unity to advance the struggle forward. And when we're in a time right now where poor, working, and oppressed people are just being waylaid by the refusal of the capitalist state to give them even the most basic support in this pandemic, I think we're fastly approaching a time where we'll need to be looking at that original Rainbow Coalition model for how we move the struggle forward.
Jalen, right. I would definitely be curious to know some of your thoughts, especially what Sean was saying about the comradeship in the movement, and what that means for us in general and how we're organizing today.
No, yeah, I think that brings up a great point. I think, like Sean just said, first of all, just to uplift everything you just said, that was very good analysis. I very much appreciate that. The Rainbow Coalition is necessary, right? And I think that that was hinted at, right, in the movie, like was said, right? To see the Young Lords on screen, to see the Brown Berets on screen, to see the Young Patriots on screen, like that's some shit we've never seen before. We have to get past anti-blackness within our communities, and that is something that a lot of people are not willing to give up. And until y'all give that up, we cannot be comrades. That's not how that works, right? We're not fighting for Black liberation and indigenous sovereignty so that people can also co-opt the movement, get to freedom, and then oppress us. That's not how that works. So when we're talking about, like I said, misogyny, when we're talking about ableism and people who have histories and rap sheets of doing these intercommunal issues and committing intersectional violence, that's not camaraderie. That's not comradeship. You are going against the struggle, right? And we have to start talking about that, right, in general. So when it comes to organizing, we start at the ground level of treating everybody like a comrade, treating everybody with respect. We serve everybody. We've touched everybody. We try to touch everybody in Chicago and around. With that being said, until you show us, right, a reason to not fuck with you, it's all love. But we are seeing too many times, right, people have different ideas of what liberation means. People think liberation means Black capitalism. People think liberation means, right, still oppressing people with larger bodies, still oppressing people who are gay and queer, right? So that's when we get over those issues, we can truly have the coalition, right? And then we need that, right, as was said. But we need to come to an understanding of what we're fighting for, which is Black liberation and indigenous sovereignty, to remove the settler colonial state, which is the reason for all of this, right? Because in actuality, it's like, well, if we look at who's indigenous and Black, none of y'all other people should be here. But we're not ready to have that conversation yet. So until that happens, we're going to organize comradeship. And that's all that is.
I appreciate you. Juan, in the booth, you want to jump in? What's up? I mean, I want you to jump in. I'm not saying it like you're imposing. I want you to get on camera. Come on.
Come on, Booth Juan.
Juan Booth.
Juan Booth. I honestly love this conversation. I feel like this is a conversation that we need to be having on a regular basis. Really parallel, using the organizing that is happening today and uplifting it. And at this moment, we can't have Fred Hampton's legacy just be in the past, or really held by Warner Brothers or AT&T or whatever they want to call themselves, HBO Max now. It's really the legacy of revolutionaries, and how do we get that legacy, which is the legacy that brought us here today. Fred Hampton, I'm sure everybody who's on screen right now loves Fred Hampton and is moved by Fred Hampton. And when we say we stand on the shoulders of giants, he's one of the giants that we speak about. I personally like the movie, but I also felt what do we expect when the movie's called Judas and the Black Messiah? That's what the movie is called. It's about Judas. It's about the Judas. So like I came with those expectations, where I didn't expect that there was gonna be like talks of socialism. I thought it was gonna be like Cory Booker's tweet where he used solidarity but didn't use it. So like I was honestly surprised because the amount of movies that come out with like our people, and by our people I mean like revolutionaries, Marxists, socialists, communists that were fighting for their communities, and their legacy is tarnished, their legacy is villainized. To me, honestly, I didn't feel like he was an anti-hero when I was watching that. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but that shootout scene, when he was, the first thing in his mind was like, let me get out this building. That's not a hero. That's not an anti-hero. That's a villain. That's a villain. The fact that he was so ready to give up his people that fast, what are we looking at here?
Well, yeah, I just have a question because I really appreciate where this conversation is going. And as a political educator, of course, when I was watching this film and we were talking about it earlier, I just kept going, all he needs is some political education. You know, we can struggle through this. Lakeith, we're going to turn it around. And there were so many times. I know. I'm
not taking that assignment.
I know.
It's just a snitch.
I'm just saying. I feel like in the perfect world for me, when I think about political education, it is as the shield and sword of the movement. And so what I'm thinking about is like, and not trying to be like gentle or whatever, but what do we actually do with reactionaries? If we are wanting to move forward into a world that is beyond the state, beyond policing, is a way to actually bring people back to their humanity. And also, F this guy. But I'm just thinking in terms of, like, I just want to be clear, okay? I want to be clear. But I mean, Sean, you might remember, like on FAMU campus, I got there, but like I remember the first time I went to a party in Gainesville, and it was a birthday party, and we start lighting the candles for the birthday. And then they start singing the Internationale. And I was like, let me get the F up out of here. Like, I ran into the bathroom. I saw the whole Capitol series. I called my friend. I was like, yo, I don't know where I am, but I need you to come get me right now. I was terrified. So yeah, just thinking about like, what do we do with folks who aren't there yet and also aren't snitching for the government, but just like who aren't there yet?
All right, who's taking the first bite at that apple?
Well, I mean, I can. Well, first I want to say, I mean, I wish I'd have been in them circles you was in on campus. I don't know. I ain't know nobody was singing the International at the birthday.
Wasn't on FAMU's campus. It was hanging out with those white kids in Florida State.
Okay. I'm about to say, they was more in the T-Pain and, they was in the Juke and Wu-Tang and all that. We weren't getting all that. But,
you're in the RGB.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We going back now. But yeah, well, first thing I want to say, as far as what William O'Neill needed, I mean, if we know how his story ended in real life, I would say that's exactly what he needed. But in general, on the question of, how do we bring people along, that is an important question. I think the real answer, what I find is that there is no better teacher than the act of struggle itself.
Right.
That's how we develop ourselves. That's how we develop each other. And Sierra, something you said a little earlier this evening, I think is so true, because it is popular in movement culture today to try to grapple with these concepts in like an academic way, like we gonna get us a panel of 4 people who we just decide are qualified to talk about these things. And, people get, some kind of trinket or something at the end and job done. I mean, look, there's no shortcut to revolutionary consciousness. We have to reject this instant gratification way of dealing with the world that's imbued in us as Americans, you know what I'm saying? Having been, raised and reared in the developing world, it creates a certain kind of way where things have to happen instantly. I mean, think about when we look at our phone and try to do something, and like with the internet, and it doesn't happen instantly. Like, we get frustrated. You know what I mean? But, the revolutionaries of movement past understood very clearly not only the importance of study, but the importance of taking that study, applying it to the conditions as you find them, and using that to develop yourself and your comrades. This is how a black group in Chicago, a group of black folks, can get with the group of Puerto Ricans, can get with the group of poor white folks from Appalachia, and be able to do things and make them work. They didn't do it by ignoring their contradictions.
Right.
They were able to address those contradictions through the act of principled struggle, because they dealt with each other in a principled way, not in this weird segregated way that we see play out so much, I think, in popular movement culture today.
The white caucus and the black caucus and the brown caucus.
Boy, some of us got more caucus than sense. You feel me? And we all split up. We got 100 million committees and ain't achieved nothing. You
At
feel
all.
me? And it's like,
have a meeting. People,
Right.
I was like, that could have been a text. Jalen, some of your thoughts.
No, yeah, to uplift that, like I always say, right? Fuck a title. Fuck. I'm sorry, I'm cussing on y'all.
It's all good. It's all good. Don't worry. We're not on regular TV. You can
Fuck
do
a
it.
title. Fuck a title. Fuck a position.
Let's
fuck
go.
Fuck a statue platform. Do people want to look up to you? Do people want to be around you? Do you look up to yourself? Do you check in with yourself and say, I approve of that decision, and right? But at the same time, we meet people where they're at. We understand, right? When I was 13, there's so many things right now that I'm looking back like, damn. If people pulled up my tweets, baby, it ain't no panel. But at the same time, it's like I was just on a phone call with a mentor today, like talking about how I identify as non-binary now, right? Like that was a whole coming of age process, right? And understanding like at a certain point in time, there were transphobic things coming out my mouth. There were homophobic things coming out my mouth, right? There were things that were affecting people in my communities, in people that I'm supposed to fight for, right?
Yeah.
Did they cast me away and say, you can't do this. You can't struggle with us, right? No, right? They took that as a learning, right? And that's not to say that abuse and harm and all of these things are acceptable, right? But we have to understand, I'm dealing with youth every day. I'm talking to youth who are getting in shootouts. I'm talking to youth who are off of pills for 3 days straight and haven't eaten. I'm talking to youth who are homeless right now in Chicago, freezing. Right? So when I think about it like that, and then I think about, we think about Nigeria, we think about Liberia, we think of any other place where there's the same things going on for global black liberation. Like was said, right? Meeting people where they're at doesn't mean ignoring what's going on. It doesn't mean, okay, you're doing all this harmful stuff. It's okay, you can still. We have to address that through conflict, but through principled struggle, through guided discussion, right? Through the conflict, we love on each other harder. We can bring each other to more love, right? That's how that, that's my, whatever.
No, I feel you.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. I feel like the biggest problem for the left, amongst other things, is like being relatable with working class people. Like there's so many people that like can come and talk to a panel, that can come and like, sit down and write multiple books. But like, where were they during the uprising of the summer? Like, were these people in the streets? Were they with working class people? Like, where are they spending their time at? Are they spending their time at like colleges, or they're going to like our neighborhoods? Like, are they going to the neighborhoods where the Black Panthers organized? And if they're not doing that work, then like, what is the work that they're doing? Because it's easy to go to like, these establishments that will throw money at you, right? And like, it's easy to like make money off of even white guilt. But at the end of the day, like if that's the audience that you're talking to, that's the audience that's been spoken to. And our communities have again and again been left behind. So like, I feel like, okay, we have a movie that came out, great. Fred Hampton is in the public eye and ear for some folks for the first time. So like, what do we do now as organizers? What are we doing to like uplift? Like, oh, they didn't show fully the politics of the Black Panther Party. They didn't show fully the politics of Fred Hampton. Like, what is that? And how is it being manifested today?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, Sierra, I'm curious. You posed the question, but I'm curious what you think about it.
I mean,
Not to put you on the spot.
no, you can't throw this back at me. No, I agree.
And I will.
This is a setup. Get me out of here. No, I mean, I agree with what folks have said in terms of the struggle is what makes that connection. I think for me, and again, this is just the film, because at the end when he was like, I was in the struggle and these are my beliefs, I'm like, all right. Yo, that's when I was like, okay, you're actually going to hell. Like when it was Lakeith, I was like, well, maybe I can give you like some study guides.
Sean, you weren't wrong.
No, but something that I found helpful in thinking about this moment in education is one of my OGs, Willie Baptist. He talks about the lessons from the Six Panther Ps, that's what he calls it, and pulling out the experiences of the Black Panthers around programs. They had so many programs that they were enacting in terms like the healthcare, the education, like more projects than I feel like we even know. Right. Protest. I think this is what the Panthers were obviously most known for. But I think what I am recognizing is that it wasn't necessarily just about, showing the guns and the left fist to scare the pigs or the cops, but it was actually to inspire other young Black youth that we can learn the laws, like we can figure out how to stand up for ourselves in our communities. Projects of survival, again, I feel like when people look at sometimes mutual aid, for instance, it's just like, okay, our people need to get fed, go off and do this. But how are we actually using projects of survival to become closer to the communities that we're engaged in? Press work. Yeah. So, they actually, like, how do you share information directly to the people and not trying to find, Time Warner or the newspaper as the medium? Political education we talked about. And then this last one, I was wondering if you all wanted to comment on, is this idea around plans and not personalities. Looking at the film and this whole concept of the Black Messiah in and above itself, and how they were able to manipulate these sort of icons within the party and other revolutionary forms in organizing. You could tell, like, it was not easy, but Eddie said it was 18 months of this work. And so throwing it back to you all, like, what do you all think about in terms of today? Like, how do we inspire folks? How do we get people moving, but making sure that folks know that it's not just about us as individuals, but about something larger and moving something, much, much bigger?
I'll go ahead. I think that was, and that, to bring it back to the movie, I think that was another thing that the movie just did not do for me, was give me a resolution for how the sustainability of the Black Panther programming as a paradigm, as how we organize right now, right? How that continued after that happened. I think it's so important for people to know we live in an individualist society, right? We live in America, we live in a settler colonial society where white people were told from the day they came here, right? You are better than everybody else, even the people you enslave, even the people you steal and pillage from, right? So organizing against that, organizing knowing the Haitian Revolution, right? Organizing knowing that it wasn't just Toussaint, right? It was the voodoo mamas, it was the witches, it was the sex workers, it was the, right? Let's talk about it. When we're talking about the principal struggle, when we're talking about a collective struggle, group struggle, everybody is invited to that table right now. People choose, like Fred Hampton said in the movie, when you get your information, you can decide what you want to do, right? The people will decide if they want to overthrow the government or not. But inspiring people to be a collective, right? Being a union, being with people. And that doesn't look like fake solidarity. That doesn't look like standing by things you don't believe in. That looks like right principle struggle, not ignoring contradictions, conflict. When we do this, we will eliminate the celebrity status, right, of people who are finding out years later are swindling millions of dollars, right, and not actually handling funds and not doing mutual aid. We will have less of the people who try to profit, and we'll have less profiteers and capitalists off of Black debt and, the Black imagination, right? And instead of using that to fund the next Black imagination and the next Black imaginaries, continue to suppress it, right? when we get to a level of personal gain, right? This is an ongoing fight for me. My fight is life. My fight is living, staying alive. That's my fight, right? My fight is not to take up space where it does not need to be taken up. If somebody could say it better than me, somebody had better say it better than me, right? So I think that's what we have to remember in this struggle. When I'm doing my work, right, I always try to shout out every group of people who's ever brought me to this place, right? Ancestors, all Mother Earth, everybody who brought us here. So understand we're fighting for something that's much bigger than just us. If you are, curious to getting into organizing, it don't look like you got to go on the news, right? It look like, did you give the homeless person down the block some money? Did you give your grandma some time of day? Did you listen to your elders, right? Did you clean up around the house? That's where this really begins at, like some Karate Kid shit, like really at the basics. But yeah.
I respect that. The Karate Kid reference
Wax
is
on,
always,
wax off.
well, sweep the leg. Sean Black.
Yeah, well, I think Sierra's question is a good one. I immediately thought of a frequent guest we have on By Any Means Necessary, Mr. James Early, who I don't know how to describe him. He's the world's most interesting man. But a big part of his work has been, like a lot of Latin American solidarity work, interfacing with the revolutionary governments in Cuba and Venezuela. But he made this point a few weeks ago that really stuck with me when he, warned against I believe he called it the like over personalization of politics, in the sense of distilling politics to personalities, whether it's a revolutionary we can admire like Fred Hampton, or Fidel Castro, Maurice Bishop, whether it's Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, people who are the furthest thing from revolutionaries. Because the moment you do that, it's then taken away from the mass base that should be its motive force. And I think the question of how we do that is, for me, again, this development through the act of struggle itself. It's through that people, I think, really see what they're made of, what their communities are made of, and what their comrades are made of. And I think that role of a leader is to both notice and acknowledge those talents, and to put people in position where those talents can best be employed towards the advancement of the struggle. And if we're not doing that, if we're not trying to develop ourselves and the folks around us, then the movement, I think, can become stunted. And I'll be honest, and I did like Judas and the Black Messiah. I don't know if I said that, and I wanted to be unaffected by it emotionally, but I did walk away with the same feeling that I have when I watch Malcolm X or Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, this feeling of wanting to be a more disciplined person, a more organized person, so that I can be more productive and best suited to make a contribution to this movement. And so I think if we can seize upon that feeling and build upon that in real life, then I think we'll be having our steps properly ordered.
Yeah, I always think a lot when I think about this question of, I think we're just throw this quote out there. Chairman Mao always makes the point. He says, the masses are the true heroes, the true bastion of iron. And I think about that a lot because I think about how in almost all revolutionary processes, the people at the moment of upsurge are always ahead of the revolutionaries. Not that the revolutionaries don't believe in the people, but you're doing this all day, every day. People come in, they come out, and things pop off. I mean, this is even in a very small sense. I remember we were in Minneapolis for Breakthrough News during the uprising there. I mean, if you had said to me 2 weeks before, a bunch of black youth are going to rise up in Minneapolis, Minnesota and burn down a police station, I would have been like, I don't know what you're smoking. It might be not what you need. And then to see this.
Shout out to Minneapolis, period.
Or exactly what you need. Give me some of that.
Juan was with us. We're driving in, and one of our comrades calls and was like, yo, I just got to the police station. The front of the thing is just burning off. And we're on the internet. There's thousands of people out there. Never would have expected it. But a brother told me the next day, he was like, now y'all understand, man. Now y'all hear us. You feel us. And I kept hearing that from so many people in the black community in Minneapolis. No one knew we were here. And now you know. Now you know that this is just like everywhere else you've heard. And the power of people seizing that moment. I mean, and this is why we talked in the show a few weeks ago about how ridiculous it is that these outside agitators. I mean, I'm seeing everybody, but you can see the community, the true community, especially the black community, including, by the way, the large Somali population in the Minneapolis area who was out there strong. So as much as we hear about, black people and Africans not being united, that certainly was not the case there in the streets of Minneapolis. And just that feeling that we don't know when the next thing is going to come unless we believe in the masses. And if we believe that we're going to be the necessary, we're so indispensable, nothing can happen without us, we're going to miss that moment and miss the fact that it's being in community and being in conversation with people on a consistent basis that's going to allow us to really seize that time. But I just think about that a lot, and definitely this Minneapolis moment, which I never expected. But Juan, I know since I mentioned it, you were also there. Obviously, you're not talking about that, but.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to move my headphones every time I talk because I hear my voice. I'm not as seasoned as Eugene. Eugene be doing this like he don't hear his voice.
It's a good voice. I like it.
I thought you meant your voice.
No, I hate my own voice. I think there's no one in America who likes the sound of their own voice. I sound like her.
Yeah, no, I think what Jalen was saying is like super important. Like moving it away from the individual. A lot of movements have been destroyed that way. Being like so dependent on like one or two or three or a handful of people that are in like the forefront. Like, how do we build movement that is sustainable, that can move forward when we die? Because the state is not gonna let us survive. Like we are enemies of the state because we were fighting for something that represents working class people. So the death, the way that we're being put at the chopping block, that is to be expected. Like, this is not a trend. Like, this is our life on the line. When we say revolutionary suicide, we mean that, because like the only way to get free is to put our life on the line, because that's the only thing we got to give, like, at the end of the day. Talking about Minnesota, like, a lot of these people we're talking about, this was like the first time they ever been to a protest, and they were young people. Right? There was young people that were brought together, and like it was not like what you saw in the media. Like it was people of every color. It was the Rainbow Coalition out there. It was like every person was out there demanding justice. Everybody was united. It wasn't like this fearful thing that was represented in the media. And we were there. It was crazy. Like I want to show this. Like I want to just bring up this quick anecdote. But like. We were like marching with folks, and the cops came. They tear gassed a bunch of people. Some of the people that got tear gassed were like CNN reporters. CNN reporters that I ended up like putting like eye relief on their face, and they got their phones and they were like, "Oh, there's nothing to film out here," because the things that they were filming was just destruction. That's what they wanted to film. They wanted to film destruction. They didn't want to film the people on the streets. They didn't want to film like the peaceful protests. They didn't want to film the people's outrage. They wanted to see people destroying things. They didn't want to show this state in a negative light. And besides so many like possible criticisms that we can have in this film, like the villain is clear. Like, to me, the villain is clear in this movie. It was the state. It was the police. It was the FBI. It was J. Edgar Hoover. Like, if you look up these people, there's no way you can say like this is an individual. They represent somebody. That room was full of people. When they were saying that they don't want to unite like communists and the rest of the New Left movement, that was a room full of FBI or CIA agents. Those were people doing the same job that homie was doing in Chicago and other states, right? That they were building their cadre right there. That was their political education. We got to fill rooms up like that and talk to our people, talk to people in our community, and say that we are the ones that will fight for a new future. And until we have that capacity, and until we're doing that on a regular basis, can't get too hurt when like a $1 billion company comes out with a misrepresentation of revolutionaries, because we can't make that stuff. We can't make it. And if we can, why aren't we doing it now? Is it just funding? We're barely funded at Breakthrough. Go to patreon.com/Breakthrough News because we want to be able to create movies that represent revolutionaries in the proper light and share the political orientation that they believed in also.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about who is this for? And thinking about how do we sustain a movement, because the Black Panther Party and the Nation of Islam, I would say, were two of the organizations that actually came out the strongest in the 1960s and 1970s. You know, starting with the rebellions, Watts, 1965. You have all of the, you know, the long hot summer up until maybe like 71, 72. And they came out on top because they focused mostly or directly on poor youth. They were able to see, you know, in Watts, where you had youth unemployment, which I believe was like at 87%, they were able to see in these, you know, urban ghettos, where there was high youth unemployment, that not only was there potential for, you know, disruption and rebellion, but there's potential to organize. And they were actually focused on those young people who had been largely ignored by the civil rights movement, who, you know, many of which were, you know, in bed with corporations, you know, trying to, you know, come up. But I think I just always have to ask the question of who is this for, and how do we focus our energies on our people who are most directly impacted, on the working class, and not just trying to pull in just masses and masses of people.
Well, you know, Sean, I want to also slightly shift the question. I mean, I think that's a very good point, so I don't want to totally shift off that point, but you know, something that you and I used to talk about all the time when I was living in DC, and I think it speaks to this issue of mobilizing people. The sort of, and I think in some ways, I've been thinking about this in this movie, the enforced submissiveness that is placed on black people as an expectation. I mean, you know, I say this all the time, Sean, Black America should win the Nobel Peace Prize every year. I mean, the fact that, you know, millions of, that just thousands of people are not just massacred by black Americans every year for the unbelievable, you know, just destruction that is put on us. And I mean, you think about what happened when the guy shot up the church in South Carolina. I mean, and on the one hand, I appreciated the folks and everything they brought to the table, but I just couldn't get down with this idea of I'm like, forgiveness? For who? For what? But then they're all over the media just, oh, it's so amazing how they could forgive and da-da-da-da. And I say that, Sean, because it reminds me, and when I'm thinking of Fred, I'm thinking of the Panthers, and because you mentioned this earlier, Sierra, the fists, the jackets, the guns, and what Panthers, you know, they talked about at the time, of trying to have an impact to kind of break people out of this, not only stupor, but fear of transgressing what is obviously, I mean, there's a reason why when they started making laws against black people, the first one they did is to take away guns. And they did this, that's why the first gun control was in Reconstruction, to take away guns. And I don't want to make it all about guns, and I don't want to make it about killing. I mean, I agree with Shay, like a true revolutionary is motivated by feelings of love. But you know, I just to bring it back fully, and I'm sorry, Sean, I tapped you, and now I'm just rambling.
Tap out.
But, you know, whatever you think about Eldridge Cleaver, one of his good essays is How I Met the Panthers.
Oh, okay.
And he's talking about the infamous Ramparts incident in San Francisco. People who don't know, Ramparts magazine was a radical magazine. Eldridge Cleaver was a writer at the magazine. He was going to interview Betty Shabazz, and did. And her security in Oakland was at that time, very small, very young Oakland Black Panther Party. And they rolled pretty heavily, very deep, a lot of guns. Huey Newton gets in this standoff with this cop, you know, chambers around in a shotgun, dares the cop to shoot him. Cop just backs down, just does nothing at all. Huey gets away and they move away. And the thing about the Eldridge essay is he says, as he's watching it, he was like, I'm watching him do it, and I just thought, this nigga is crazy. But then the next sentence that he said, but I realized that what I thought was crazy was actually courage. And I've never forgotten that, because it's that bad inward trope from slavery, that if you transgress this thing, that you can challenge the system in a real way, somehow somehow there's something wrong with you, and you're not really you're defective in some way. And I just, that to me, maybe I don't even know if it's about this movie, but the legacy of Fred Hampton, the legacy of the Panthers, the aesthetic legacy, to me is not that it looked cool, but that they thought of a way to make an intervention that could legitimize the idea that you can resist. So I've said too much now, Sean.
No, that was great. Thank you for
that. That forced submissiveness that you're speaking to is just, it's an embarrassing, lingering legacy of the experience of enslavement on African people in this country. And that's why some of our luminaries are people who we could describe as bad, like Nat Turner, you know, Henry McNeil Turner, you know, Assata Shakur, you know, Malcolm, all these types of people who were audacious and courageous and not reckless, but what we were really seeing is them functioning as full, free human beings.
Wow.
And as Black folks in this country, we are taught in ways implicit and explicit that we're not worthy of the fullness of our humanity or the fullness of our personhood. So much of the Black liberation struggle is a reclamation project in that way. You know what I mean? And so that is, I think, the power of, seeing that kind of courage, seeing someone who's willing to stand up to the system. I'm recalling the scene, I believe I read it in Bobby Seale's piece, Seize the Time, when they were outside with their guns. And yeah, there were people calling them crazy, but then they were like old women, everybody like, well, they got some guns, they run in their house and got there. So it became like an almost, that revolutionary spirit became infectious. You know what I mean? And so it is a real question of how to tap into the spirit of a people and the spirit of a struggle. Growing up in church, the old folks used to say, I wouldn't have a religion that I couldn't feel sometime. And I think this is the attitude that we should have toward the movement. How do we make the people feel it? Well, what did the Panthers do? They spoke directly, clearly, and plainly to people's conditions and saying, this is the condition, this is why it's the way it is, and above all else, here's what you can do. You can be an active participant in your destiny. You don't just have to sit there and take it.
Mm-hmm. Jalen, I'm going to give you the last word before we get ready to move to a close.
Oh, for sure. Uplifting that. And I say this all the time. My hero's the heroine, right? I have a lot of family and people I know who went through the crack epidemic, went through the heroin epidemic. And if we're not fighting, if the movie is not accessible for your grandma, if the movie is not accessible for your cousins who are outside right now, if the movie is not accessible for your people who are locked up, then we got to reconsider who this movie is for, right? And we got to remember that, like has been said, right? Marsha P. Johnson said it as well. I may be crazy, but that don't make me wrong, right? Marsha P. Johnson started off the Stonewall riots, right? So when we're looking at history, we're looking at who was deemed crazy. First of all, crazy is a Western word, so that's already anti-indigenous, anti-black. But who was deemed crazy was the people, like was said, who spoke up, right? You don't see that same trope with John Brown, who was a white man who killed 56 people in Harper's Ferry and had the Potawatomi rifles. We learn about him because that's another revolutionary that we understand was part of the armed struggle, but we don't hear about him the same way that we hear Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey, right? And we hear about these people who were problems and were, had to be contained, right? So I think that, the movie, and in general, right, the culture of organizing that we're fighting for right now, it got to be able to hit, right, the grandmas, the babies, and everybody else in between, right? It can't be missed on anybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jalen Kobayashi from Good Kids Mad City out of Chicago, deeply, deeply appreciative to you giving us some time. Sean Blackman, by any means necessary. As always, my brother, I appreciate you. Great to be on with you. Y'all have a great rest of your evening. Thank you so much.
Peace, y'all. I love y'all. Love.
So much. Y'all be cool now.
So a couple things before we get out of here. First and foremost, I just want to remind people, go to savethehamptonhouse.org. savethehamptonhouse.org. For those who've been watching, you heard it. If you just tuned in, this is Fred Hampton's childhood home. Due to the work of Fred Hampton Jr., other activists in the Chicago area, the home was able to be established, and now there is an attempt to make it into, it's a museum is one element of it, but I don't like to just say it like that, really a vessel for the legacy of Fred Hampton, the legacy of the Black Panther Party, what it means today. It would be an amazing contribution, but they, like us, are crowdfunded. There's no one giving them millions of dollars to do this, and as Rosa Clemente mentioned at the top of the show here, and thank you to Rosa again for appearing, some of the renovations must take place to have it even be a historical landmark. So it's still at risk, potentially, in the way these things go, of maybe not even being there. So we wanted to be able to do many more things, be a vessel for the legacy of Fred Hampton, and an important center, but savethehamptonhouse.org. Savethehamptonhouse.org. There was a few things I wanted to bring up. I'm not going to bring them all up now, in terms of interesting things, but I do want to say, Go to, if you look this up, this is one of my favorite essays. It's called Lest We Forget. It's by Sophia Bukhari, who herself was a Black Panther. At one time, she was the day officer and a community organizer in the Harlem branch, also a member of the Black Liberation Army, also a political prisoner. One of the most amazing memoirs I've ever read in my life, The War Before. This essay is in there. It's called Lest We Forget, and it's about all the Black Panthers and all the BLA members who were killed. And I want to at least bring up the one about Jake Winters and read this, because I thought the moment with his mother was powerful about who he really was, Spurgeon Jake Winters. So I don't know if we could bring that one up here, and I just want to close on this, because I think it's important to remember the true reality of these were people, they were humans, yes. They were working on so many things in so many ways and at such a young age. So if we could bring that here, I'm just going to read it. Spurgeon Winters. Jake was an honor student in school and a revolutionist. He worked on the Chicago chapter's breakfast program and the free health clinic and was part of the education cadre. He was killed when 100 policemen opened fire on him and Lance Bell, who was wounded. 3 policemen were killed and 7 wounded in the attack on the deserted building where the 2 took refuge. Jake was 19, assassinated November 13th, 1969. So it played an important role in that film, and I want to read that again. That's from Lest We Forget by Sophia Bukhari, which I just really hope everyone reads. Very poetic, very deep. Sierra Taylor, it has been an honor to be here alongside you. Thank you for being with us. I don't know why we shook hands, but I'm
felt like the right thing to do.
It did. It was very, very chummy, but I appreciate that. No, it was great. Thank you
for having me.
No, of course. And thank you to everybody who watched here on this special episode here at the Freedom Side on Breakthrough News. Next week, we'll be back on our regular time, Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Thanks to all our guests, Jared Ball, Rosa Clemente, Jalen, Eddie Conway, Sean Blackman, just fantastic people. Really thanks to you again. But that is going to do it for us here today on the Freedom Side from Breakthrough News.